And we have 4 months to go before that general elections is going to be keenly contested. And today, Akufo-Addo got the final opportunity for his finance minister to present his final mid-year budget review. And for Dr. Amin Adam, this was his first indeed. But for the government and for the Akufo-Addo presidency, this is his last mid-year budget review. And so this was a big deal indeed. Also because it comes in an election year. And one of the key things he says today is that they are not seeking to ask for more money to spend. In fact, his point is simple. The government is going to live within its means this year for the remainder of the year. And why is that important? We know this is critical because in election years, what tends to happen is that government overspend. And we have a significant budget deficit that then after the elections, the next government will have to spend some time trying to fix. But he tells Parliament today that government is going to live within its means. And for you out there, what is in this for you? And many of you are getting home right now wondering, what should I focus on if I missed it? A few things we want you to focus on. Some of the key bullet points. The minister told us today that there are no new taxes. And for you, that definitely is good news. Because going into this, many actually expected that the presidency, the finance ministry, will give us something that may provide some relief. Well, we didn't get the relief, but we also got no new taxes. What else will you focus on? You should also focus on the fact that in 2025, whoever wins the elections after the 2024 general elections on December, government says they are laying plans now for road tolls to return. They scrapped it, they abolished it, they've eaten the humble pie. They want to return next year. But who really will be there next year? They may not be there, you know, because it's an elections and it's anybody's elections this year. It could be NPP's election. It could be NDC's election as well. Another thing to focus on is no additional expenditure is the point I was making earlier. They're going to live within their means. And for them, this is key. We'll tell you where they are going to cut because they're actually proposing to cut a fair bit in the appropriation that they've already placed before the Parliament last year to govern the entire 2024 period, right? Then we'll come to that. And then we know that there are a few things they want to do when it comes to the labor front. A new law is going to go to Parliament. And a few things that I saw that was interesting. One is that they want to introduce paternity leave, but they also want to extend maternity leave. It's a proposal they're making, and they're going to go to Parliament for that to happen. So what's in it for you? If you are interested in this, then it's one of the areas we want to highlight for you to pay attention to as government goes to Parliament with that. And then, of course, you're going to prioritize a few roads, right? And for many people, if you travel the length and breadth of this country, you're asking them what will influence your vote. And I did that in 2016 with ballot box. The top two, you will definitely have roads in it. So the government is aware of this, and they're going to spend some money doing that. Whilst they spend the money fixing the roads, so they're telling us that they're going to be reducing the appropriation by 21.7 billion cedis. That is huge, right? But if they're doing this, the question then becomes, what are they cutting specifically to accommodate this reduction? And appropriation have already been approved and passed. It's a legislation that has been approved. Will they go to Parliament with this proposal for this cut to happen? At least that is what they're proposing, 21.7 billion. The Deputy Finance Minister will join me here on PMX and tell us where will they cut to accommodate this 21.7 billion that the Finance Ministry told Parliament they will be seeking a reduction in as far as the appropriation that they placed before Parliament is concerned for the 2024 budget year. Now, another important point that we noticed today is the key issues around social interventions, right? 5.4 billion is what you're hoping to spend on this. LEAP is one of them. Another key point is school feeding is going to be important. Again, remember, what's in it for you? Government says it's going to spend this on school feeding, LEAP, but also NHIS is also going to take a fair bit of this cut here to improve it a bit more. And then capitation grant will also be one that will be focusing on in terms of spending this 5.4 billion that they are hoping to spend. And then there's this big figure I want to also put across That is what they have spent between January and June this year on the free SHS policy, 1.5 billion. Both parties, both candidates are proposing a review of the free SHS. And so we are waiting for the specifics in the respective manifestos. And then we get a sense of whether or not this amount going forward will be less. But this is what government has spent in the last, 6 months. And it was before Parliament today for consideration. The MPs were debating this. But talking about roads, though, and I made the point about how much money they want to spend on roads this year, and that is a priority area for them. So which roads, if you're asking, let me tell you, one of the roads they're focusing on is the Accra-Kumasi Highway. If you travel on that road, government says this is an area of focus for them going forward. That's not the only road you're focusing on. The Accra-Takoradi Highway, if you drive on that stretch, you possibly will notice that work is already going on. The finance minister says they will complete this. And the same stretch, though, you're talking about the Takoradi-Agora in Kwanta Junction. He also says that will be completed. Timelines, we didn't quite get clarity on that, but government has committed resources for this. But the almighty Temafenyo Road, which many who live on that stretch have been complaining about for a while, government says there is money for it, and they will make sure it is completed. So these are some key roads the government is going to be focusing on going forward. But for Guta, and they'll be joining me for a conversation tonight, the issue about the cedi's depreciation was important. I checked the budget review statement, shortly after it was delivered by the finance minister. And as far as the subject of depreciation of the cedi is concerned, there was 2 mentions in the budget. And in the first mention in the budget, when they mentioned the subject of depreciation of the cedi and what government intends to do about it, was really to just, in essence, tell us how the cedi has performed against the major currencies. And this is the graph that tells the story. The government was simply comparing for us what has happened last year to this year. And the second time, they went a bit specific, tell us whether there has been an improvement or otherwise. And if you look at, for example, the 2024 as against 2023, you see the government making the point, the finance minister making a point today, that we have seen an improvement in terms of the cedi's strength against the dollar. And you see there, he says, for the dollar, for example, which is for many what they watch, last year we were at 22% in terms of depreciation. This year we're just doing 18%. And he says that is improvement. Is that good enough for Guta, for example? We'll ask them when we sit for a conversation. And then we talk about the public debt, which, by the way, is a fundamental reason why we went to the IMF. Our debt has become unsustainable. It currently sits at 70.6% to GDP. And we're talking about 724 billion. That is huge, up 22%. So that is climbing. And you see why government is proposing to cut expenditure this year. They're not asking Parliament for more. They simply want to cut a bit more from the appropriation. We'll get some specifics as far as that is concerned. But then you're still talking about budget deficit. And that is, how do you square this circle? Government is cutting expenditure, reducing appropriation, but we still are going to have budget deficit because government is still spending in areas, right? And how are they going to finance this? They tell us they're going to do this. Domestic financing, treasury bills, etc. is going to be an area where they still look to finance this particular deficit. 54 billion. Question is government doing enough to cut this down? But they also want to rely a bit more on foreign financing. But you know that when it comes to foreign financing, we are currently locked out of international capital markets. There is the expectation that with all the restructuring, this will be open for us somehow. But government is really relying on bilateral, multilateral funding, World Bank, etc., to show up and clear this particular huge bill that will emerge in terms of the deficit going forward. Will they succeed? I don't know. The minority believe this is much ado about nothing. The economy is on autopilot. That's according to Kesala Tofosi, who you see behind me there making that point. My guests are joining me tonight for a conversation. You want to stay with us because we're going to be unpacking this a bit more with Guta, with AGI, with the hoteliers. And then we'll have the Deputy Finance Minister join me. And then we'll also be speaking to John Juniper from the minority side. This is thoroughly covered tonight on PMS, so you don't want to go anywhere. And thanks for staying with us here on PM Express. My guest joining me for a conversation tonight in the studio with me very important in these. We want to tap into what we've heard and also get a sense of what the various groups that have been monitoring this to check what really is in it for them, what they're making of this. And that is why in the studio with me to look at this is the president of the Hoteliers Association, who has been monitoring this very closely, Dr. Akanyamike Jr., who's the president of the Ghana Hotels Association. Doc, thank you very much for joining us here on PM Express again. Also joining me on Zoom is John Jinapo, who's a ranking member on the Energy Committee, also was a member on the Finance Committee in Parliament. Dr. Joseph Obin is also joining us on Zoom. He's the president of the Ghana Union of Traders Association, GUTA. And Stephen Amwa is a deputy finance minister. He will join me in the studio pretty shortly. Dr. Theo Champon is joining us also right now with his own thoughts on what has happened today. It is big, obviously, because of the elections, and we're all monitoring to see whether government will give us an assurance that they will stay within budget. They've actually, attempted to do a bit more. We'll come to that, but let me come to you, Dr. Nyamike, on what we heard today. And I'm pretty sure you were listening to see really what is in this for your members and your industry. I noticed that he talked about the tourism sector, but the tourism sector, it can't operate in isolation. It operates within the economy, right? If the economy is doing well, you would invariably also benefit. Did you hear anything that gave you confidence that you're getting there?
Evans, thank you so much for the opportunity, and let me say good evening to your viewers and listeners, and also to say kudos to your media house, because we've observed your sustained interest in the tourism and hospitality sector for obvious reasons, because I've always said that the industry is one of the lowest hanging fruits for our economic development. Having said that, we came up with some wish lists, which I don't even call it expectation, but a wish list from what the minister was going to say today. And let me say that his presentation has come with a mixed bag of excitement and disappointment. Checking the list that we had.
Let's start with the good news first. What excites you?
The good news is at the macro level.
Okay.
I mean, the debt restructuring sounds like good news. The fact that they are trying to expand the tax net through the invoice, and also the fact that there are plans to upgrade some of the roads, it's also good. And then you can also see some amount of stability, again, at the macro level, because the real GDP has also been adjusted upwards. These are signs that things are stabilizing. However, when it comes to the real deal, which is how we face the economy, which is how we face our business, that is where we have challenges.
Okay.
Well, I mentioned, I think, on one of your programs that before the 2024 budget reading, we had some serious meetings with the Ghana Tourism Authority on the issues of the taxes that we pay as an industry. And at that meeting, we came to the firm conclusion that there was a need to look at the taxes regime, especially when it comes to the industry. More so when people complain a lot about the high rates of hotel services. So we got to a point where we proposed a consolidation of the taxes in the industry.
Okay.
The VAT, the NHIL, the COVID, the GET Fund, and all the other taxes. Consolidate it and bring it to a level that is comfortable for us. We were told that the information went in late, so they were going to consider it in the mid-year review. So we were waiting.
So you must have waited now for 7 months.
Exactly.
But that was in November.
Patiently, hoping that request will be dealt to, but it wasn't. And again, to the exchange rate, and then the fuel prices. It's really biting hard. Because the exchange rate also links to the electricity tariffs, which is one of the major inputs in our business. So frankly, we wanted to hear, and I'm glad you mentioned it, we wanted to hear clear measures. And I said it in the wish list. And I had the opportunity. Unfortunately, yesterday, we couldn't come for the program. Yeah. Because I had the opportunity to speak on another media house. And we made it clear that we wanted to hear clear measures dealing with the inflation, even though it's gone down a bit, but we are still not where we want to be.
And then you also wanted to deal with the exchange rate.
Exchange rate, then the cost of borrowing.
Okay.
And all that. So, but unfortunately,
you didn't hear that?
We didn't hear it.
Stay with me. I want to bring in Joseph Obeng. And Joseph Obeng, I know for Guta, the exchange rate was a big deal for you. And as I mentioned in my intro, I was combing through the document to see, okay, how much attention was government giving to this? It was mentioned twice. That exchange rate phrase was mentioned twice. First time he mentioned it, it was just giving us a recap of how the city had performed against the other, currencies. And then the second time, he was making the point that the rate of depreciation has slowed compared to December last year. Were you convinced?
Yeah, the fact that he was comparing where we were coming from, and then he put up some figures, and it indicates that the economic indicators are getting better with regards to inflation coming down, and then the seeming stability of our local currency. If we do that comparison, then we say that we have gotten some gains. But what we are expecting is the effort that they've made, the measures that they put in place to bring these gains should be sustained so that we can sustain these gains. We have to put up those measures so that we'll be able to sustain these gains and even bring further down inflation, and then also the value of our local currency to be appreciated. So essentially, we think that government have to do a little more by sustaining these gains. And to be fair with the minister, he also said that he's going to spend within his limits.
Yeah.
It means that that's one measure that he's going to do to ensure that it does not put any burden on the economy to affect these gains that I'm talking about. So when you think in that direction, then we think that going forward, they will be able to bring these indicators, positive indicators for businesses to thrive.
Okay, so that's a positive take on what the minister said today. I want to bring in Dr. Choi Champong, who joins me. Doc, you're also a political risk analyst. So the biggest threat our economies are faced in an election year is overspending. The minister says today they will live within their means, but boldly, he also saying tonight, and I want to quote this, he says, we are proposing to reduce appropriation to 237.3 billion. And if you do the calculations comparing to what they had gone to Parliament for last year, they're talking about some 21.7 billion. How significant is this?
I think it's important, and actually the minister says, and by the way, good evening to everyone, that they are not requesting for any extra spending or supplementary spending, which does indicate to me that the government is largely going to contain the expenditure bill, even though revenue performance has not been as expected halfway point throughout the year. So you look at, I think there's paragraph 46 and 47, and it goes further down and it says that the provisional data for the first half of 2024 shows that revenue mobilization and expenditure execution were broadly in line within the target, and that resulted in an overall deficit of 21 billion. And then there's a few more details further on from there. But there's a clear commitment in this media budget. One, you're not getting any extra spending. And I think that's just because of the IMF being around, where the IMF is not around in any other sort of year, and especially with an election around the corner, you would have had a bit more spending in that side. So I think it's a positive development, and like the speaker from the tourism industry also says, we've seen relative stabilization on the macro front. So you can take a number of indicators and they all point to the fact that the recovery is being sustained. But of course, it has to now translate into the micro level issues, the cost of living and other related things that need to be addressed. And you see an attempt in this media budget, and I think we'll see more of that in the bigger budget to come in November, to shift, right, the momentum of the economy more towards growth. So there's talk about roads, there's talk about potentially bringing back even the tolls, right? And then there's a big emphasis on housing as well, and a few other things on trying to collect a little bit more revenue. But I think overall, the story for me is one that is relatively positive, and compared to other supplementary budgets or media budgets where the government normally comes to ask for more money, this time around, they're not asking for more money, and spending is within the parameters that had been set.
And I want to bring in John Judah point to this. John, you agree with that relatively positive?
Right. Certainly, I've been looking at some of the numbers. First of all, I find it very, very instructive that you decide that you run down an economy by pumping so much money from the central bank. The economy is derailed. The IMF comes in and insists that you engage in zero financing. Certainly, you would expect that inflation will come down. That's a fact. It's a natural occurrence, and not because somebody has done some magic. And so you just leave it to the fact to say that inflation has said reduced from 50% to say 23%. It doesn't mean anything has done, anybody's done something good. It's just that the very bad policies you were implementing, which was hurting the economy, the headmaster has come on board to insist that it will not allow you to go down that trajectory. And for me, that is where you situate this debate. You cannot just, and even listening to the narrative, and you don't put this within that context, you'll be carried away to think that somebody has come up with some magic somewhere. But you see, it's important that some of this analysis, we don't do it just based on the Ghana context. When you do it that way, it will be flawed. So the revenue target was 76 billion. Now the revenue was 74 billion. So there's a shortfall of 1.4 billion. That's not a small shortfall. If you look at the expenditure target, it was 104 billion. It ended with 95 billion. The difference is what we did not pay in terms of our debt service obligation. So because we couldn't pay our debt, especially the external debt, that is what is accounting for this expenditure shortfall. And so where is that positive outlook? Where is that positive outlook when it comes to this expenditure? First of all, the revenue you couldn't perform. The expenditure, you couldn't meet that target because you've not paid your debt service obligation. And so I'm asking myself, where is that so-called positive outlook? That is one. Now, if you go to the debt stock itself, and for me, that is very important because the next government will have to deal with that debt stock. And you read the budget itself, the debt stock is moved to 742 billion. And you know why we have 742 billion? Principally because of the depreciation of 22% of the currency. Because 60% of the debt is held in foreign currency. And so because your CD has depreciated so much, your debt stock has moved by 22 billion in just 6 months. That should be worrying for me. That cannot be a positive trajectory at all. Now inflation, and when you do these things, you ought to be comparing. I refer you to just a moment, to the Bank of Ghana Monetary Policy Report, March 2024. And I think that is the latest. I take you to page 7, page 14, page 14 of 57. And then I take you to, just a moment, please. I'm pulling some data for you. I want to compare us to our peers. Because in this analysis, the argument is being COVID and all that. That is true. But then you don't operate in isolation. You operate within a sub-region. And so sometimes I don't want to compare us with the advanced countries, but our peers. And the Bank of Ghana itself gives you countries such as Ghana, South Africa, Nigeria, Kenya, Zambia, Morocco, Angola, Egypt. I'm sure the Bank of Ghana finds these countries comparable to us. If you take the policy rates, we are one of the worst. If you take inflation, we are one of the worst. If you take the real growth rate itself, we are one of the worst. If you take overall fiscal deficits, indeed, we are the worst. If you take GDP growth, we are one of the worst. So clearly, when you compare yourself to your mismanaged economy, if you compare yourself to your rundown economy, because of very, very bad policies, you might be tempted on the surface of it to claim that you are doing well, but that is not enough. Compare yourself to your peers. And in economics, in finance, in accounting, what you do is peer or industry level comparison. And I'm telling you, when you compare us to our peers within the sub-region, we are down there. And so we should be asking ourselves, what our peers are doing that puts them in such a better position compared to Ghana. And
well,
for
Mr.
me,
Janapo, stay with me. Theo Champon, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I appreciate where John is coming from on the savings or the expenditure, the fact that it's actually much bigger relative to the revenue numbers. But the point is that if you actually work it all out and you look at the other indicators, whether it is growth and even on the inflation expectations, right, for the rest of the year, you look at this document, you look at other documents, including even the recent one that the IMF issued on their website, and the outlook is actually much, positive in that sense, right? So specifically look at paragraphs 56, 57 of the mid-year, budget, and you can see that revenue and grants for the rest of the year is actually revised upwards by 0.5% to 177 billion, and that's roughly about 70.4% of GDP. You look at the expenditure side of the equation, which is really where you have the big trouble or challenge, especially in an election year. That expectation is that it's going to go down by 2.1% or 21.5% right, of GDP. And so overall, what then happens is that by the end of the year, the budget balances that normally you would have in election years, where sometimes we're doing a double right deficit and a double even current account. This time around, we probably would end up with around 5% or just a little over 5%, budget balance at the end of the year. And an important thing as well is that there are some structural reforms that are still meant to be pursued and implemented to ensure that this happens by, the rest of the year, part of the IMF, program commitment. But in this document and in some of the other government documents, it's very clear that one of the things that we need to do is to amend the Fiscal Responsibility Act and then more or less introduce the numeric, the deficit ceiling, which of course has been suspended since 2020. And then there's some other things around bringing back the ITAS, the Integrated Tax Assessment, and all of that. So I do appreciate where John is coming from, but when you actually put that in the context of what is happening to some of our peers and other places, and the outlook, especially the challenges that the economy and the people of Ghana have gone through since 2022, the outlook is much, much positive in my view.
Okay, and stay with me. Let me quickly.
Can I make a point there?
Briefly, if you may, because I need to take a quick break. Yes.
So, Dr. Tio, if you look at 56, the revenue, it tells you that it reflects dividend from interest accrued in the ESLA accounts. So you are talking of the energy sector levels. That is where they are looking at. Then if you look at the expenditure itself, 57, quickly jump to 13, the concluding part. The revision is largely on the back of interest payments, which has been revised downwards by 7.9 billion to reflect the impact of external debt restructuring. And for me, that is very, very important, that you are not paying the debt today. What happens in 2026? And that is how I like us to do this analysis.
No, but you've got the interest payments. This is what you're getting over 3 years under the domestic. You've got the bilateral commercial restructuring, and then the Eurobonds that have all been restructured in terms of the savings and the reliefs that you're getting.
That is where I am going, Doc. That is where I am going. That one is not because of some fiscal prudence or monetary policy prudence. It's just because we have not been able to service our debt. We've gone to tell them we can't pay, and they are taking a haircut. And you and I know that this has a long-term effect. So I don't see this as any significant achievement. That is number one. Number two, I don't know if, Doc, you have seen the details of the restructured agreements. Have you read the details?
So
both from the official creditors.
Not all of it. Not all.
Have you read that from the official creditors? I haven't seen it. The one from you.
Not all of it, but we do have the MOU and the agreement in principles with the official bilateral. There's some information out there in terms of what is being offered. So effectively,
Thank you. But my last point, my very last point, is that in 2022, and in 2020 in particular, in this same election year, we were told that we were within the band of the fiscal deficit. You agree? Eventually, we ran into more than 15.7% fiscal deficit. Go and check the media review of 2020. Government assured us that despite us being in an election year, they were going to be within the band and give us these similar figures. When the year ended, we realized that we had the highest deficit in sub-Saharan Africa. So given that history, yes, this might sound sweet, but I'm telling you that given the trajectory and the track record, I would wait to see the end of the year.
Okay, gentlemen, thank you. I want to come to Dr. Nyameke. I want to take a quick break. But before I do that, I want to hear from you on this. Because from the business community, the confidence is important. If the signaling from government gives confidence to people, and then investors can come in. How are you reading what you're hearing from the finance minister? Does that give you confidence that you're going to keep your word? Because there's a bit of disagreement over whether you can take the finance minister's word to the bank. Are you taking his word to the bank?
Well, Evans, I love listening to economists. I was enjoying.
So give me the practicality. Yes. I'm not an economist either.
Yes, because at the end of the day, it comes down to real business. And I must say, listening to the minister today, what I told myself was that, yes, again, I mentioned earlier, at the macro level, there seems to be some confidence building up in terms of the improvement in some of the indicators, like the inflation, for instance, and then the exchange rate has stabilized over the past few weeks. And he also indicated that compared to the previous year, this was better than that.
But is that translating to lived experience for your members?
That's what I'm coming to. But then when you come to the real issue on the ground, we have realized that the economic environment is eroding our profits.
Still, in spite of the stability that the minister talks of.
Exactly. And that is why I think there is some mismatch between what is happening at the macro level and then what is happening on the ground. And you see, the point is that even when you try to get those macro figures right, the point is that we are still dealing with the, variables like the exchange rate, Because a lot of our hotels import, especially the upmarket hotels. They import a lot of things because they don't get them here. You have to deal with import duty. You have to deal with the exchange rate as well. And then the cost of borrowing too. Okay, so when you look at all these factors and then you compare it with what is being said about the bigger picture, there is some mismatch.
To stay, I want to try if I can get the sense from Guta, whether they also have the same experience. Dr. Obeng, what's your experience there? Are you seeing a mismatch between the macro positives and your lived experience as traders?
Yeah, I can say, if you can give me the question again.
No, I mean, I'm just listening to Dr. Akanyamike here, representing the Hotels Association, is telling us that, yes, he's had the positives as far as the macro level is concerned, but there is a mismatch. The economy is still eroding their gains, and they're not feeling the benefits that the minister is talking about at the macro level. What's your experience of traders?
Yeah. You see, the media budget did not tackle the mainstream budget of the year. In the sense that we have been talking about cost of doing business being high because of the level of taxes. And so the status quo remains. Even after the media budget review, the status quo remains, especially with regard with taxes, because even though new taxes were not put on the media budget, we still have to contend with the taxes that we pay, and for that reason, we can say that still those things are impacting on us negatively with regards to the way of conducting our business.
And the exchange rate? The exchange rate is still a big issue?
Is that?
The exchange rate is, I know that has been your biggest problem. How is that affecting
you? The exchange rate, all that we seek is stability.
Okay.
If it is stable, because we don't want it to fluctuate, that's what business does not.
Do you
like
have stability?
So
do you have stability now in the exchange rate?
That's why I used seeming stability, and then I was seeking that whatever measures that they put in place to contain the high rise of the dollar should still be adopted so that we can sustain this gain. For me, this is the most important thing for businesses. So if we're able to achieve that, that one will help us. And if somebody says that we have gotten a gain, then we are comparing what we used to experience to now. It's before and now. And so if somebody say there's improvement in the economy, we are not saying that the state at which we are in is better, or but then when you compare to the past, then you say that there's an improvement, and that we need to sustain it. That's the most important thing for me.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to take a quick break here, and the Deputy Finance Minister is joining me. He will join me in the studio because there are a few questions that you obviously have to take, particularly from what we've heard from the Hotels Association, but also from Guta. They want stability. Whatever.
But I also want to ask him a question.
Yeah, okay, you also want to ask him a question. Okay, he'll join us, and then you can put your questions to him. Stay with me here on PM Express. And thanks for staying with us. I've just been joined by Dr. Stephen Amoah. He's a Deputy Finance Minister. He's in the studio with me. My guests, also with me, we've been looking at the mid-year budget review. John Junapo is the ranking on the Energy Committee, also on the Finance Committee. Also, Joseph Obeng is the president of Guta. And we also have Dr. Edward Akanyamike, who is the president of the Ghana Hotels Association, and Dr. Tue Champo, who is an economist. Let me come to you because you're just joining us on this. Before you came, we heard from the Hotels Association, we heard from Guta. There is the fundamental question about the positive macroeconomic indicators with the finance minister talks about today, that he says the recovery is strong, the stability is in, but then that disconnect between that and what people are feeling in their pockets and your real lives. How do you address that balance?
Okay, thank you very much. I hope I have enough time to come.
You just have,
First,
you know, I've told you
forgive me.
already because of the time. Yeah.
I was late. It wasn't my fault, actually. When you're into these positions,
No, that's fine.
You need to attend to it, so next time I'll come back.
No.
Evans, my regards to our listeners and our viewers this evening, and we give thanks to God for successful presentation of our budget by Dr. Amin and Honorable. He's one of the most fantastic ministers I've ever come across.
You've already spent a minute of the 7 minutes I have left.
Evans, the issue you are raising, if you remember, it's been, I would say, a national chorus. And not that they are wrong. Anytime, most of the times when governments are touting themselves with good macroeconomic indicators, then people say, we don't feel in our pocket, if you remember. So what they are saying, I wouldn't say they are far from the truth, no. The cause of it is also because of our prevailing market. We have two types of markets in the world. I mean, generally. It depends on the market type that is quite predominant in your country that determines readily impact of your economy on the people. We have the one that has something called systematic risk index. Those with one, if the economy moves 10, they move 10. So when the macroeconomic indicators are doing so much well, readily they feel it. We have those that are far less than one. So when even the economy moves 10%, either they move slowly or they don't move at all. It takes a long time. And these are normally identified with the SMEs. You know, SMEs occupy about 90% of our economy. So it takes a long time for these indicators to impact these actors or SMEs or the market. And this is a fact. Nobody can argue or say anything contrary to that. There could also be the chance, the second statement I'm making is quite hypothetical because I haven't run any scientific thing, could also raise issues about correctness and the integrity of our data. That's, I haven't run data on that, and I'm speaking, I hope you understand.
The data you're using, is it accurate?
No, ours is correct. I mean, 100%. I'm talking about the general issues in Ghana. Because the same data Statistical Services, Bank of Ghana, IMF, World Bank use, were the same data that moved our inflationary rate to 54.1%, and we were accepted. And now it's about 22.8. Our reserves, far less than 3 months. Now it's over 3 months. You realize that most, in fact, our GDP, we are getting around 4.0, 4.7 first quarter, even beyond the final revise of about 3.1. So these are all indicators that a few months back or a year back, we were being beaten left and right by the public and other relevant stakeholders. And now they are doing so much well. You realize that we are reversing the trend, which gives hope to Ghanaians. Because we need to understand the fact that where we were, the priority or the precedence had to be given to stabilization of the economy.
And you said today that you stabilize the economy.
I said that. Okay.
But we stabilize the economy, yet people are not feeling it in their lives. What's the point of the stabilization? So
it's a process. What I'm saying, it's a process. You know, sometimes you can have malaria, and then you'll be vomiting. You are not eating. You seem like you are dying. You take medicine. You see that you've taken the medicine. You take some time because maybe your red blood cells have been affected. So it's a process. And one of the things the government has done, which is good, is committing about 8.2 billion for the SMEs. And it's a new strategy altogether by the finance minister, where this time we are going to give big capital. You know, at first we paid a lot of people 2,000, 1,000, and sometimes you don't. Now, we want
where are you getting the money from?
Oh, World Bank is helping us. I think, as a African Development Bank, the minister himself we also have some portion from, because we are realigning our budget as well, I mean strategically. So we are putting measures in place to make sure that even now we are creating jobs, because we realize that the white-collar job or the corporate job is congested, the space. So now I want people to be interested more in triggering their entrepreneurial instincts. so that people will open jobs and employ other people. And we are going to do that, picking about 100 to start with.
100 SMEs?
Your top entrepreneurs, yes, and give them big money. We'll do it region by region. This time we're not going to do anything about politics. Honestly, we are not. My minister is so serious about that, and we're going to run this model professionally. We are going to train the SM because we also realize that when you give them the money, some of them do not even understand their own value chain technically. So it is something that we are bringing on board to make sure that whilst people are going through hardship, we are coming from another angle, from an entrepreneurial point of view, and make sure that we this time finance the SMEs with some large amount of capital, not the small ones, so that they themselves can expand and also create jobs for other people.
Before you also came, we heard from Guta, and they say that the stabilizing the city is a big deal for them. In fact, it's also a big deal for the Hotels Association. So how are you going to keep this stability?
I think
it's a seeming stability. It's not what he actually said. It's a seeming stability. It's not actually
in the first place, it's still high. But you realize that this year, the depreciation to the dollar is a little over 18.
I mean, those facts are known. I mean, the question is how do you stabilize?
I need to put this there.
Also because of time, because you actually need to
it was
wrap up.
A little over 18. Last year, the same time, it was over 22%. So it means that we are making some improvement. We are getting inflows in dollars.
IMF?
The World Bank, IMF, even Cocoa syndication. I am thinking that these measures, in my opinion, are temporary. We need a long-term approach.
So what's a sustainable
approach? The sustainable approach, one of them is what my minister is doing now.
Which is?
Which is giving them large sum of money in the form of capital to create jobs and produce. I'm coming. When you ask, let me also land my sentence. Because if I give you 2 million now and you start producing, things that we are importing, we'll cut down that. That is a fact. Industrialization, we are taking it to a different level altogether. So I understand your point, and it's a process. It's not event. Because we import almost everything. When you talk about this, you say, don't talk about that. Look at your office here. Look at myself. And gradually, we are beginning to empower our private sector to the extent that now they'll begin to produce almost everything. Well, and it will take some time.
That language we've heard since January 2027 with one district, one factory. Yes.
But
so 2017. Yeah, 2017, that's what I meant. 2017. We've had that language.
But one without over 100.
As
you know that?
Creating,
it's a process.
Creating champions,
yes.
creating industries.
Yes.
Well, 7.5 years on, you're still saying the same thing.
Not the same thing. I think 7.5 years down the line, we are committing this time in addition because it's a process.
Okay.
Look, Evans, we also have to change our attitude.
Okay, I mean,
most of us also patronize black market.
As you know,
I hope you understand what I'm saying.
When you vote for a government, you want the government to fix things, and
we are fixing things.
Shift the blame on.
But I think no, we are not shifting. We are talking about things. We all have to also change our attitude, our mindset. It's also important.
There's a lot to unpack, and Dr. Nameke, thank you very much for joining me. I mean, he's tried to address some of the issues.
You didn't even let me address
and I know that John Jidap also had some question for you.
No.
But
he can't ask me
listen,
he's in the same parliament with me. We've been talking for almost 2 hours today. He didn't ask me.
There's a debate that is going to happen on the floor of parliament, by the way.
It'll be very interesting.
We will see how that goes.
It'll be extremely interesting.
And Dr. Nameke, so you've heard the Deputy Finance Minister try to address some of your issues on the issues you raised earlier about not feeling the macroeconomic positives in your own pocket. Does that, from what he's sort of said there, money to give to SMEs, does that address your issue?
Evans, the economists have a way of explaining things which sometimes do not make sense to the ordinary person in terms of the actual.
But interest rate is coming down.
So
is interest rate not coming down?
What I would say is that I think they must try harder.
Okay.
They must try harder to let whatever is happening on the macro level translate to the micro level.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I would say that gradually things are coming down. So we empathize with you. We know how you feel. We know where we went to. And now you see that if your child was vomiting and now it's not vomiting, then you see there is hope.
Okay, Dr. Stephen, I want to thank you very much.
It's a big
Dr.
pleasure.
I'm grateful to join me. John Junopor, Dr. Chue Champon, and Dr. Obeng. Enjoy the rest of the evening.